welcome to the As You Are podcast. My name is Leslie Vandergans, the founder of Enso Coaching and Consulting, and I am here with two of our amazing coaches, Libby and Kathleen.
Yay!
And our special guest today is a co-founder and CEO of Guardian Bikes, Brian Riley. Welcome, Brian.
Thank
We're
you.
so happy to
Yeah,
have you.
thank you so much for having me.
So Brian and Libby and I all worked together for a while, several years ago, and that's how we know each other. But Brian, will you tell everybody about Guardian Bikes and what an amazing product it is?
Sure. Yeah. So Guardian Bikes, we specialize in making the safest, easiest to ride kids bikes in the industry. We sell them online, direct to consumer. They all feature a unique technology called SureStop, which is actually how the company started. I wanted to solve a safety problem in braking, which is where if you grab your front brake too hard, you can flip over the front of the handlebars and get really injured. So all of our bikes feature this amazing SureStop technology. It's our own patented braking system, and we've really become known as a leader in the kids bike space and just making it safer and easier for kids to learn how to ride a bike and enjoy it.
That's awesome. So can you talk about how the brake actually works?
Yeah, so it's essentially like an anti-lock brake system, kind of like your car, but it's a really simplified mechanical way to do an anti-lock brake system. So you can think about it like normally a bike would have two different brake levers, one for front, one for rear. And a lot of kids and even adults, they're like, wait, which one's the front? Which one's the rear? What am I supposed to do?
By the time you realize it's too late.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do when?
Just done both. Yeah.
The reality is, like, even if you figure it out, the moment that, a ball rolls across the street or a cat cuts in front of you, you just go ooh, like this and grab both as hard as you can. So that accident happened to a family member of mine, actually my grandpa, and he flipped over his handlebars and broke several vertebrae in his neck.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started developing this system, it was, how do you prevent that accident from ever happening? What we came up with was a system that is a single lever. So you just, instead of like figuring out which brake to use or just grabbing both of them, you're just always dealing with one input. So similar to a car, like when you want to brake, you just step on a pedal and everything just happens.
Yeah.
This is how this system works. So you just grab the brake lever and the braking forces are distributed in the proper way across front and rear. And it works in a way where the moment that the rear wheel lifts off the ground, it actually lets off the front brake. So if you start flipping over the handlebars like this, it'll just boop, let off your front brake and serve as essentially like an analog brake system.
That's awesome. And
Yep.
it was this technology that you took to Shark Tank, right?
Yep.
So one of the cool things is that Guardian Bikes was on Shark Tank.
We were on Shark Tank.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about that journey? Because you did have bikes at that point.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting journey. When I first started the company, I never intended it to be a bike company. I was working on this braking system, wanted to get it out there to as many bikes as I possibly could get it on. The mission has always been about making biking safer, but initially it was just the braking system. I didn't envision doing bikes. And when I first started the business, I got a handful of bike companies that were adopting the technology. We were selling the technology into like big incumbent players in the bike industry. And then after a while, we decided to start doing our own bikes for a number of reasons, but there was just a lot of things that the bikes that we were going on, there was other safety issues and other issues that we just didn't think that were right with those bikes. And so we thought we could solve a lot of those by creating our own bikes. Right around the time we started creating our own bikes, we had the opportunity to go on Shark Tank. We applied to go on. It's this crazy funnel of like, I think there's 50,000 people that apply to go on it or something like that. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so, somehow we made it through all the cuts and got all the way to the show, got on the show, got a deal with Mark Cuban, who we wanted to get a deal with going on the show. So I pinch myself sometimes looking back at that whole thing and just how lucky it was that, we got that opportunity and that happened. But yeah, so we brought at that time it was, SureStop technology. We had our bikes. We were still selling to other bike companies and we had the bikes, and the sharks, kind of argued with each other over, is the right business model to, keep selling this to all the bike companies, or is it to really create a bike brand and do it around safety and kind of do things in a different way? Luckily, Mark really connected to the idea of like really, building a bike brand, because that's kind of where we were going at that time. And then after the show, we closed the deal with Mark and slowly kind of wound down the selling of the braking system to other companies and just really, really focused on building our own brand and doing a number of things in a whole new, exciting way.
Yeah.
So today we sell completely online. We have our own factory in the US, making these bikes, and it's a very different type of bike company than the traditional bike company
Yeah.
in our industry.
Well, one of the things that I remember being a little bit of a challenge is that there's not awareness around how unsafe bikes
Right.
are simply,
Right.
and we're moms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so we, we're it's just like we go to Target and you buy the
Yeah.
princess bike with the streamers
Yeah.
because it's got
Yeah.
glitter on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I
The
buy
end,
bikes.
right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that was super enlightening about working with you, is learning a little bit more about how unsafe bikes are.
Right.
And so because one of the things that we talk a lot about with business owners is just kind of sticking yourself into a spot where like something needs to be solved.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about like what that gap was and how you
Yeah.
guys were solving for that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think we got a really interesting perspective and sort of like a peek under the blanket, if you will, of like the bike industry, how it works, and like an understanding of what causes the problems that exist in the bike industry, namely like why these bikes are just kind of super unsafe and pieces of junk. And it's so I don't think we would have gained, when I look back on this whole journey, if we had started just making bikes and started a bike company and then started competing in this space, we probably wouldn't have had the same insights. But because we made this braking system and we're trying to make bikes safer, and then we were going to Schwinn and Huffy and all the, the big players and trying to get on their bikes. And then we would go to their factories that make their bikes and we'd try to teach them how to install it, and we'd see how everything's done there. And we'd meet with Walmart and we'd see how they make their decisions and stuff. The reality is that like in those channels, to be successful in, let's say, a Walmart or Target,
Hmm.
if you ever go into that aisle, there's nobody there to help you. There's no customer reviews. There's no information really. So the way that those companies are successful is they make a really good looking princess bike or whatever, something that's going to be exciting to, you and your daughter as you're walking by the aisle. And then they make it really, really cheap, like $100. So you're like, hey, my daughter loves it and I'm just going to take it home. The problem is that when you're optimizing around just cost and looks, and you're never judged by customer reviews, you can just sell millions of bikes. People go home, they have terrible experiences, and parents think that, oh, my kid's just not taking to riding a bike,
Yeah.
or they just don't like it.
Right.
But in reality, it's like the bike is not built well. It's kind of inherently unsafe, so they don't feel comfortable on it. It's
Mhm.
challenging for them to learn how to ride on, and then they give it up pretty fast.
Yeah.
What we found with Guardian is by having this much safer bike, it actually completely changes the experience of that the kid has. So when they start learning to ride on a Guardian bike, they immediately fall in love with it. They build all this confidence. They want to ride it, and the parents just go, "Hey, this is awesome. I guess my kid really loves riding a bike."
Yeah.
But
Aw.
underneath all that, there's this real safety problem that we're solving, and we've kind of, the brand's still very much about safety, but the consumer benefit that kind of goes right in line with safety is the child building confidence and having a great experience,
Yeah.
and you feeling great about your kid wanting to get outside and use the bike, and the smiles that are coming on their faces. So now on the marketing side of things, we lean a lot more into those benefits.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, if somebody's looking at the bike and the features, they can read about Sure Stop and they can read all the reviews and they can understand how safe it is for their kid also. But just having such a better experience on a bike is, is a huge consumer benefit that we lean into now. So sometimes we do these video shoots, and in the video shoots, we're doing some kind of comparison against a Guardian bike versus kind of a status quo bike,
Yeah.
like a Schwinn or Huffy or something from Target. Um, and we'll have a group of kids and we'll ask those kids, okay, you guys are going to get on these bikes and side by side, go down this little hill and stop. And what we find is like sometimes there's a kid that rides a Guardian bike and has a great experience, and then they ride the Schwinn bike and they kind of struggle, and then we want them to do it again, and when we want to put them on a Schwinn bike, they'll just start crying, and they won't
Aw.
want to do it, and
Yeah.
they just
Aw.
won't participate. And we kind of started realizing, kids are never going to express like,
Mhm.
hey, I don't feel confident on that bike.
Yeah.
Like I don't
Yeah.
feel safe. I just don't want to get on it.
Yeah.
They're never going to verbalize that. They're
Yeah.
just going to cry and say like, I don't want to do it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so then parents, they feel bad because they're like, well, you're 5, 6, 7 years old now, and you need to learn how to ride a bike. So get out there and
Yeah.
get on this bike,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
just
Yeah.
don't know that it's the bike. It's not their kid
I
necessarily, right?
know.
And
Such good
so
awareness.
we've seen that happen over and over where somebody gets a Guardian bike and they may have just completely failed on whatever bike that they had before. And all of a sudden they get on a Guardian bike and they succeed in 20 minutes and
Yes.
it completely transforms them. And so just this whole idea of it's not your kid, it's their bike,
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
is now kind
I
of the
love it.
thing.
Is that your slogan?
Yeah,
That's
I
like
love
the
it.
new
Not
Guardian
your
bike
kid, it's your
slogan.
New marketing campaign.
You had mentioned earlier that it's hard for parents to understand or necessarily know that, that the status quo kids bikes are unsafe
Mhm.
and we have something
Right.
safer, but what they can see is their kids experience, and they can see what their kids are experiencing kind of through their reactions and their feelings, whether they want to do something or not want to do something. But it's very easy to confuse that with like, oh, they just don't like riding a bike for some
Yeah,
reason.
they're not good
Totally.
at
But
it.
if you don't
or
know that the inherent quality and safety and the way that these status quo kids bikes are and how much of a difference it is with something
Yeah.
like a Guardian bike, that, once you realize that, it's a game changer. So
Yeah.
that's really what we kind of lean into these days, is just that transformational experience that really happens when you have a much better bike.
I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
I'm like, what else can we apply those brakes to?
I know.
I
So
love
many
it.
things.
I love it.
Yeah.
I know, and I think it's just so interesting when you're talking about this. I'm thinking about like parenting being so different, because I think a child of the '80s or whatever,
Uh-huh.
like it was like get on there and I'm
Yeah.
holding on,
Yeah.
and there was all
Just
this like
kidding,
Yeah.
and then
rude
you-
stuff, and you
Yeah,
fall
and
down
they
and
just
you
push you
crash and
down
all
the
that.
hill and-
But I think parents
Yeah.
these days are a little bit different in their approach to how they want to engage with their kids and gentle parenting and all these other
Yeah.
tactics. And so what you're doing is you're essentially also like catering to the way that parents parent now,
Yeah.
which is
Mhm.
Yeah.
really pretty
Empowering
amazing.
their kids, kind of
Yeah.
evolving and
Yeah.
changing
Yeah.
and giving the kids,
Yeah.
Tools.
tools. Yeah.
Giving them what they need,
Yeah.
right? Like giving them a faulty bike
Yeah.
isn't at the end of the day what
Good
they
luck.
need.
Yeah. I mean, you want to
Yeah.
try to, stack the deck in their favor a little bit, especially in something that's such a, huge milestone moment of childhood and stuff. And so I think even if you're, an old school parent and you think, I'm just going to teach them to ride like I learned and push them down a hill and let them figure it out,
Yeah.
you still want to put them on something that's safe,
Yeah.
something that they have a good chance to, succeed at.
Yeah.
And for you as a parent, you're going to feel successful too.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
so
I
exactly.
did.
It's
I was
just-
like, oh my God, look
Yeah.
at
This was
me.
me.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not you, it's the bike.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay, so one of the other things is really cool is COVID. So when COVID happened,
Yeah.
Finish that thought,
Not
Leslie.
so
That's
cool,
it.
but
That's
cool.
the thought. COVID was great.
segue.
Yeah.
COVID was not great.
Yeah.
For Guardian bikes, however, it was a time for some massive growth for you guys because it was at a time where people weren't getting out and they needed
Mhm.
to do something with their kids. And then when inventory was an issue, Guardian bikes had inventory. So you guys
Yeah.
grew a lot during the time where the lockdown had happened and
Mhm.
all of that. And so then now there's this kind of at the tail end of that, there was this evolution of getting into US manufacturing. Can you talk a little bit about, because that's a huge part of Guardian Bike's identity now,
Oh,
is
yeah.
that
Yeah.
these bikes are built in the United States, which is really, really cool. So can
Yeah.
you talk about that evolution and that growth?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mentioned all the, this is another facet of the business and the strategy and just everything that we do today that's very much driven by just the insights and the learnings from starting the company just with the braking system and working with all the existing players in the industry. So, what I learned was that basically every single bike, I mean, we're talking in the kids bike category, like 98% of all bikes that are sold in the United States are coming from China, and the other 2% are coming from other Asian countries.
Mm.
There's basically no manufacturing whatsoever in the United States for bikes. So that, we were looking for ways to, how do we build safer bikes? How do we control the setup better, the quality better? That was one aspect to it. So rather than trying to partner with, some overseas factory and like teach them all these things, how do we take more control of that? Another thing was COVID happened and it became, the supply chain, the world's supply chains really got disrupted for the first time, where
Yeah.
people actually started to realize, hey man, like everything that we get kind of like comes from somewhere else.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and
Yeah.
if that somewhere else isn't going to ship us the stuff, like we're not going to have stuff.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and so, so it was actually Mark Cuban sent me an email like 3 or 4 weeks into COVID and just started asking like, hey, have we ever looked into seeing if we could pull off US manufacturing for bikes? And I think he was starting to see the writing on the wall with that the US China relationship was kind of never going to be the same again. And, that the start of that kind of reshoring thinking, like, can we build things in the United States again? Can we, be competitive as a manufacturer? So he started kind of, asking the question that kicked off a bunch of research. Ultimately, what we decided for a number of reasons is if we could pull this off, this would be kind of the supply chain model that really allows us to scale in this kind of direct consumer fashion where we're just selling direct to consumer because you can react to like if your sales are a little bit different between this size or this color this week you can react to what you're making on the floor that day,
Immediately.
right? And
Yeah.
you can change your inventory levels to the demand signal almost immediately,
Yeah.
whereas when you're importing everything from China it's like 6 months of time
Right.
between the time you make a decision on some inventory change and the time it's ready to go in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And then you look at how big a bike is. So you're basically shipping this big product in a box that's mostly air, right? If you think about these wheels, it's just
Yeah.
like, it's just a bunch of space in the frame. It's a big triangle, right? So like you're shipping these huge boxes. There's only about 300 of them that fit in a 40-foot container. So if you're doing hundreds of thousands of bikes, you're talking about many thousands of containers that you're transiting across the ocean and on trains and trucks and finally getting into
Right.
the warehouse. And so just from a sustainability perspective, we
100%.
were thinking, man, if we just can make the bikes in the market that they're consumed in and take out all of that carbon footprint of moving around this crazy amount of containers,
Right.
it felt like the future way to do it. Like this is if we can figure this out and kind of be a leader here, this just seems like the way it should be done.
Yeah.
And so that set off this kind of crazy journey of executing on this plan, which we're about, I think maybe 18 months into. We've got a full blown factory with 90 people working there in Indiana, cranking out bikes, and so we're really vertically integrated now, which is cool because we kind of control everything from the factory floor to the customer's door.
Hmm.
Where normally, you're outsourcing to a factory and then you're partnering with Target and you're kind of like, you're not very close to the customer. You're not very close to the product. You don't have a lot of you don't control a lot of that value chain and you can't really innovate on that entire experience. But the fact that we can set up a bike in Indiana and it goes in a box and it goes right to consumer's door and we have a relationship directly with that consumer family,
Hmm.
it's just a really neat model.
Yeah. I mean, and people can pick up the phone and call your customer service team and say, I don't know how to put this wheel on, or, my child's struggling with X, and then they
Yeah.
can immediately support
Mhm.
them as a one-on-one relationship, which is also
Exactly.
like huge.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to call, like for the most part, if you bought a bike from a bike shop, you could call the bike shop, but the bike shop would be like, so what kind of bike is it? And when did you buy it? Okay, you can, take it in here. We have some time, next week to look at it or whatever.
Yeah.
But they can't really help you on the phone because they're not the makers of the bike,
Right. Right. Exactly.
And then if you bought one from Target, good luck.
No one.
Yeah,
You know,
They're
good
not
luck.
talking to
Customer service,
anyone.
please.
So it's really it's another really neat thing about the whole experience that we've built is we make the bikes, we sell the bikes, we support the customers who buy the bikes. So if somebody calls, we know we've heard every single thing that can possibly be asked about the bike and we can very quickly help you. And it's 7 days a week, it's every day. You pick
Yeah.
up the phone, somebody answers within minutes. So it's a neat part of our business too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how cool is that to bring that many jobs just to the US and within the manufacturing? I mean, that's a ton of
Mhm.
jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. We do it in Seymour, Indiana, which is a small, kind of rural Indiana town. And it means a huge deal to the town and the community there. And
Yeah.
it's a growing operation too. And so it's just bringing growth into the town. There's a lot of manufacturing that is left over, the previous decades, and we're
Mhm.
bringing manufacturing back. And it's a neat thing to be a part of. It's a very kind of neat thing to see in person too. Just
Yeah.
all these people, making bikes right here in the United States and doing it competitively and having
Yeah.
it all work and doing it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of, can you talk a little bit about what kind of culture you're trying to build there in that unit and in that space?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the really unique things, there's not a lot of manufacturing jobs or just manufacturing companies
Mhm.
who are connected directly to their end consumer.
Mm,
So like a lot of the people that, work at Guardian, if they had a manufacturing job before, maybe they were making headlights at a headlight company that's eventually going to go into a truck that GM sells, which is eventually going to go to a dealer, then eventually going to go to a customer. But
Mhm.
they're just so far removed from how the customer is going to experience that product that they're making
Yeah.
that it feels to them more like I'm just making, XYZ widget.
Yeah.
But at Guardian, the bikes are coming off the line and they're like every bike that comes off the line, it's going to like somebody's door and somebody's 6-year-old is going to ride it. And
Yeah.
that the experience that kid's going to have and the parents are going to have, they're just the manufacturing jobs there are just so much more connected to the customer and the customer experience just because the company is vertically integrated and we're dealing directly with customers and that product is connected directly to customers. So we try to put, we have TVs on the wall that have reviews streaming in and stuff like
Aw, I
that.
love
So,
that.
they'll be on break and they can read a 5-star review of somebody that had a great experience and they know that, they're building these bikes that people are using and having great experiences on. So a lot of the culture is, about customer obsession and that goes into, how we're building the bikes and how much we care about quality and stuff. But you can reinforce a lot of that stuff so easily because we have reviews and we have, there's a name when they put a tag on the box, like there's
Oh,
somebody's
no.
name and address on
Oh
there.
my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so they know, they finish setting up that bike, they know it's going out to somebody and somebody's going to have a great experience on it. So it's a we try to reinforce that culture, but it's almost a natural part of the business model. And it's a unique part of, being able to have a manufacturing job where the company is, connected to actual people instead of just some other company or some other company.
There's this idea like that you could step outside and see someone riding the bike that you built.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's
And that
really sweet.
happens. I mean,
Yeah.
there's quite a few people in Seymour have them, and Seymour's a small town. So even the people that,
Oh no.
even the people that,
Seymour's the cutest.
yeah,
Yeah.
the people
Just
that work there,
FYI.
they can be walking around in downtown Seymour and see a Guardian bike being ridden and they're like, I probably made that one,
That goes so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
One of the things, Brian, that you've talked a lot about today is like, you started with this idea of sure stop
Yeah.
and then recognized, gaps and holes and opportunities and then pivoted to the bike company
Mhm.
and then saw an opportunity or a gap in how they were being manufactured and what the relationship was and, again, the safety, the weight, the consumer experience with the places that were holding these bicycles.
Yeah.
And then again, saw another opportunity with bringing the manufacturing in, in this process. I mean, the thing that's amazing about it is that there's no marriage to an idea or a
Mhm.
Yeah.
concept,
Uh-huh.
right? There's this constant evolution. And so like, what are some of the things that you've learned as you came up with the idea of Sure Stop to where you are now? Like, what are some of the main themes that you've learned in kind of growing the business?
I mean, I think, gosh, so many things. I think one of the biggest themes is just, perseverance, like starting and then continuing, not giving up, continuing go because you just don't. I mean, you can see it now in the rearview mirror, but even if you think about businesses that like think about Amazon, they started as an online bookstore. Maybe Jeff Bezos had some vision of like eventually selling more things than books, but I'm sure he didn't have a vision of having an entire cloud business and like all these other things that Amazon does that are so far away from online bookstore.
Mhm.
But it's just, it's somebody who got started, kept at it, saw opportunities, kind of capitalized on different opportunities and just kept an open mind and just kept building value. And so it's, like, I guess entrepreneurial advice generally is like, just get started. You don't even have to have like a huge grand vision.
Mhm.
Just if you have a passion for something, you want to get something out there, get started and just keep going and, don't give up, but be willing to adjust and pivot. You could say my original vision of getting SureStop on millions of bikes and other people's bikes, that didn't work out.
Right.
But I was open enough to pivot into, making the bikes, and then, pivoting into continuing and now doing the factory and all that kind of stuff. No way I could have known that stuff when I started,
Right.
but
Right.
I started. That was the important part. And then I didn't give up, kept an open mind. And so it's that flexibility, it's that openness, ability to learn, ability to kind of persevere. And I think underlying it all for me, I cared so much about getting the technology out there because I had a
Mhm.
personal experience with it. And
Yeah.
it was, something that I felt was important. And so if it's something that you feel is important, that can give you the strength to persevere through the hard times and continue, and also be willing to adjust and, pivot and do what you need to do to figure out how to make whatever you're doing is successful.
Yeah.
So that's a really important piece too, is like,
Yeah.
hopefully you're doing something that you care about. Because
Yeah.
I mean,
if you don't,
Yeah.
it's very easy.
Yeah.
It's very
It's so
easy to
true.
to hang
I
it up,
love that.
Yeah. One of the things that you said was that moment where Mark Cuban called you and said, "What do you think about US manufacturing?" Right?
Yeah.
What can you talk a little bit about these like critical and key partnerships? Because
Yeah.
a theme that we hear quite a bit in these conversations is just like no one succeeds alone, right? Like this is
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
everything's always about the people that
Yeah.
you surround yourself with. So I'm just curious about your experience with that too.
Yeah. Well, Mark Cuban is a huge one, I'd say. The biggest thing about Mark is just you all of a sudden wake up and you're like, oh, I'm partnered with Mark Cuban. And it kind of gives you this confidence of like, okay, well, I mean, if I've got Mark in my corner, I could figure things out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whether that's different for different people, sometimes it's a really critical co-founder, sometimes it's a really critical partnership that you unlock. There's all kinds of different things that kind of unlock the ability for a business to get to the next level. And even over the course of building a business, like there are multiple unlocks and multiple key people or partnerships or investors or whatever that might help you get to the next level. But to your point, I mean, it is very important to, if you want to build something, it's very important to know that like you need other people, and
Mhm.
you need support, you need partnerships. And I have some friends that are kind of, they've done kind of they've been like a one-man show entrepreneur for a long time,
Yeah.
and that's fine, and it works for some people. But certainly if you want to bring, you know a product into the world at some kind of scale, or you want to like solve a problem, and do it at some level of scale, you need to work with people, and you need to
Right.
have those key partners.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. What's next? What's next for Guardian Bikes? U.S. manufacturing. You've got another location that just opened. What's happening next?
Yeah, so the factory thing has worked out beautifully, and we're becoming we're starting to become experts at like how to run a factory. And so what I talked about with, bikes being so big and wanting to make those bikes close to where people live and just take out all that transportation. The future model of Guardian Bikes is to actually have multiple factories. So we've got one in Indiana now. We're looking at building one on the West Coast that serve West Coast customers. And then eventually, as we expand internationally and stuff, we can kind of put that same factory footprint in whatever market that we're selling bikes in. And that really enables us to be this kind of, one, really nimble, two, control all the aspects of the product that we like to control, and safety and all that kind of stuff. But importantly, just really disrupt the model of every bike comes out of China, goes in a container, and travels all around the world
Yeah.
to get to whatever market that it's going to be sold in. And just having that huge separation between the people making it and the people buying it,
Mm-hmm.
bringing that close together, is not only, a huge thing for just an environmentally sustainable standpoint, but it really kind of empowers, like, if you have people in a market making a bike for the people that are going to buy it in that market, it's sort of like this human connection of like people building the stuff and people
Yeah.
like
Consuming it.
consuming the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
That's sort of this magic that we're seeing, as we're doing this in Indiana, that really is just, I think, a better model to sell bikes and probably a lot of products, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh, absolutely.
but the future of Guardian is just continuing to grow the business and really expanding on this whole vertically integrated,
Mhm.
consumer products.
Love it.
business model.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, I'm just sitting and thinking about all of this where it's like by taking it into these other spaces, you are expanding, but still keeping it local, right? Where it's like you're
Mhm.
keeping it small, even though you're expanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's pretty neat. I mean, wherever, let's say you live in, you know, Tennessee and you get a bike, it's pretty cool to know that that got made like in Indiana, like right there.
Yeah. I could
And
ride my bike to the place.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like, you think about localized produce or local,
Mhm.
it's this whole idea of like local manufacturing, especially when it comes to big products. It just makes a lot of sense. You just cut out all of the crazy moving moving big products all around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
So I think the common thinking is it can't be done because of U.S. labor prices and stuff, but I think we've proven it can be done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you were talking about shipping it and moving it and the giant boxes in the air and all that other stuff, yeah, it's a lot of cost.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, where can people learn more about Guardian Bikes?
Yeah, guardianbikes.com is our website. We're pretty active on Instagram, so Guardian Bikes on Instagram is a good place to follow us. And yeah,
Follow Sam Markle on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. We got our VP of
He's an
manufacturing.
influencer now.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
want to like
Shout
go
out
see
to
those
Sam.
pictures of like
Yeah.
people smiling and achieving.
It's so cute.
It's really
It
cute.
really, I mean, I will say that anytime Sam posts anything on LinkedIn, it's always so great and empowering. And it's like, it's just lovely. And I love just seeing everyone, in the factory just working so hard.
Can
And
we get like a 5-star stream just like going in our own living rooms of like
Yeah.
I
positive
know,
things
yeah.
people say?
Yeah.
I'd like to look at
Yeah.
that.
That's so good.
I'm going to implement that.
I know.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Brian. We're so happy you were able to join us from Indiana.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are the
Thank you.
chances?
Thank
It's
you
so
guys so
fun.
much for
Yeah.
having me. This is
Thank
great.
you. Thank you. And thank you guys again for joining us. Please follow the As You Are podcast and subscribe to us on all platforms and nsocc.com. Talk to you soon.